Dr. Billy Taylor is here to talk about Wynton Marsalis, a young trumpet player I frankly never heard of. How did you hear about him?
Well, a friend of mine, Art Blakey, who's one of the grand masters of jazz, told me about this new trumpet player who was working with his band. And considering the fact that he had discovered people like some of the really great trumpet players like Freddie Hubbard, for instance, and many others, even earlier than that, Clifford Brown and so forth. I said, well, hey, let me check this 18-year-old out. He was fabulous. He really was exciting and soulful. He had all of the qualities of a well-educated player. And so I didn't know what to make of him.
And he had all that at 18?
At 18. It was just remarkable. I couldn't figure how could a kid be so mature, look so neat, and be so different from most of his peers, but he was.
What is it that makes him different?
Well, for one thing, he's being groomed by a large record company and this is a big difference because records are what put you out in the public eye and give you the exposure you need. But he's one of the few with talent. One of the things that makes him different is that he's well trained. He plays in the European tradition as well as the jazz tradition. And so he's made a classical record, he's made the European classical record, and he's made jazz records. So he is just as exciting in both.
Let's do it again. Let's start up from where you all are walking in the beginning, about right here.
At the age of 21, Wynton Marsalis has the peer acceptance and critical acclaim of which grand careers are made. As the trumpet player and leader of a youthful acoustical ensemble, which includes his older brother Branford on saxophone, he's burst ahead in the world of jazz by firmly planting his feet in its mainstream past.
Let's do it again. Let's slide on some of that note. Slide on this note. Beep, boop, boop, between the E flat and the next note, even if it's just a half step. There we go. Yeah, like that. Slide down on every note. The modern phase of jazz is only 40 years old, man. And not that many people can play it or have played it for a long enough time for it to get old. You know, me and my brother, every cat in my band has played funk, can play funk. Right? I'm not a cat who stayed at home and studied and doesn't know. Right? But I'm here to tell you that even though that music is good for dancing, when you want to hear music, we have the goods, period.
Critics have hailed Wynton as a virtuoso for his work in European classical music as well as jazz. His name is commonly linked these days with such masters of the trumpet as Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, and Clifford Brown. He's a graduate of two distinctly different musical finishing schools, the Juilliard School in New York and Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. He's toured with many top jazz musicians.
I want to go, I got it bad.
All right, where you do that in, G?
Though he might make a lot of money if he were more commercial, Wynton has resisted it. He prefers the jazz of Louis Armstrong and Thelonious Monk, the jazz of his father, New Orleans pianist Ellis Marsalis, the man who gave him his roots, his jazz.
A lot of times there were things that I did in New Orleans that I thought mistakenly would lead to national prominence, which never did. And My first real experience with that was when I joined Al Hurst Band about 1967. And I began to see how national groups function. I still didn't understand the means. You know, I just had a pretty good glimpse of the ends.
Al Hurt gave Wynton his first trumpet when he was 6 years old, but he was 12 before he took the instrument seriously.
My father hooked me up with this teacher, great teacher. I used to go to his house on Saturdays. And he helped me with my very basic technique because I couldn't play at all. You know, not at all. Didn't know my scales. Just like everybody else when you're 12, you don't know anything, you're ignorant. But he instilled in me the desire. I really wanted to learn.
Though Wynton now lives in New York, he frequently returns to New Orleans to visit his parents and younger brothers, 17-year-old Delfield and 5-year-old Jason. The first order of business this trip, every trip, is listening to some newly found work by an old jazz master.
Dramatic. You swinging hard now, man. You swinging hard. Are you swinging?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
You swinging hard?
Yeah.
But great music is never dated. Classic music does not become dated, period. Louis Armstrong's music is not. You think somebody can play the trumpet with that kind of emotional intensity and depth? And if there are a few cats, it's giants like Miles, who are still playing, Clark Terry. It's just that it's a shame that our music has been dragged in the mud and the levels are not appreciated. See, in the place of Miles and in Clark Terry, we have Tom Brown and Herb Alpert, and Chuck Mangione. Which I'm not saying that in a negative thing against Tom, Herb, and Chuck, because they can play what they play. And they'll admit this. You ask them, and they know those are the geniuses. They aren't even close to that level, man. That's a level that every young musician should look at with awe and reverence. Now go to C sharp.
Wynton is very busy these days, but despite this, he found time recently in New Orleans to coach a younger musician.
Like this, go. All right, so you work on that.
As a classicist, he has recorded with the Prague Chamber Orchestra and played with the New Orleans Philharmonic. Last year, he recorded his first album as a leader.
It's really strange. My mom sent me your album in the mail, and I went,
No, I'm trying to get it together. Trying to get him to learn these chords.
Wynton's record may be the best-selling debut album in jazz history. It sold more than 100,000 copies worldwide, and that's great in a market where 35,000 sales are considered good. The success of that album has opened doors for other members of the Marsalis family. Ellis, Branford, and Wynton Marsalis have collaborated on an album called Fathers and Sons. Here at Joseph Pabst Public Theater in New York, the Marsalis clan rehearsed for a concert, which included some songs from that recording.
Ellis Marsalis is a proud patriarch.
When I was growing up, jazz was still kind of a dirty word in a lot of quarters, and even now, it's kind of sneered at.
I'll stretch it out.
So to see the kinds of accolades that they received, and to visit New York and see a lot of young kids trying to play, it is a good feeling that they were fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time, doing what was necessary to receive this.
What's that tune? Buzzy.
Buzzy.
While some may hail Wynton Marsalis as the new boy wonder of jazz, he sees himself as just one of the Marsalis boys, trying to keep it together.